Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Higley, president of the BHN Group. Welcome to the virtual edition of ALIS Summer Update, Nashville style. We were scheduled to be at the Margaritaville Hotel, Nashville, the land of parrot heads. So I thought I would get in a little bit of the spirit today. I do hope that all of you are staying safe and healthy. You know, we're all carefully navigating the bumps we encounter, and I wish the best for each of you in the days, weeks, and months ahead. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to be with us today. We held out hope that we would be able to have this event in person at the Margaritaville Hotel, Nashville. We held that hope until the last possible minute, but the surges in COVID-19 cases and the associated travel restrictions led us to make the decision to take the ALIS Summer Update series online. And we're really happy you could join us. While we will miss the camaraderie of seeing everyone in person, we're happy to present an insightful panel today that promises to keep you up to speed on the latest trends in the hotel industry. I want to take a moment to thank the BHN Group team. That's Jonathan Zink, David Seibert, Rachel Ugay, Tricia Gregg, and Razy Simons for all their hard work and flexibility in keeping this program on track. So thank you, team. It's wonderful to work with you. One quick reminder, as you mentioned as you exit today's program, please complete the short survey. It's a big help for us to get your frank feedback as we use it to develop future online programming. So thanks in advance for your help. So you see on the screen now, we are preparing the celebration of the 20th anniversary of ALIS from its days when it started way back at in the Century Plaza Hotel in LA and moved to San Diego. Now we're in downtown LA at LA Live. So January, we're scheduled to host the 20th annual ALIS, and of course, I think it's the 7th annual ALIS Law Conference right before that. So, you know, cross our fingers that things continue or things will get better and travel will become far less restricted and a vaccine is found for us to continue with that. So we look forward to seeing you there. Well, a little bit about the host hotels that were originally scheduled to host the events of the ALIS Summer Update. We had the TWA Hotel in New York, where we had that program on Monday. Of course, today, the Nashville Hotel, the Margaritaville Hotel Nashville, where we were supposed to be today, and then the Virgin Hotels Dallas in Dallas, where the program is Monday. So again, we want to thank those hotels for all of their flexibility leading up to the preparation for this, and looking forward to working with them in the future. A big thank you to the sponsors of the ALIS Summer Update event, AHLA, which is particularly partnering with us on the Nashville and Dallas events. So we want to put an extra thank you for that to AHLA. Davidson Hotels and Resorts, which manages the Margaritaville Nashville. MCR, which owns the TWA Hotel in New York. Virgin Hotels, which obviously has the Virgin in Dallas, and then Access Point Financial, Hall Structured Finance, Hodges Ward Elliott, McNeil Hotel Company, Stonehill, and Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. We want to thank you again, sponsors. As we mentioned, the summer update is going virtual. We had the program on Monday. We're having the program today. And then this coming Monday is our final program in the three-part series in Dallas, or would have been in Dallas. It will be virtual, but it will be the same program that we had planned for Dallas, which will run from 1:30 to 4:30 Central Daylight Time on Monday. There's still time to register for that event at alissummer.com. So we look forward to seeing you there again at that event for all of you that are joining us today. Today's agenda, we'll have this quick welcome, and then we're going to get right to the heart of the order and have a great conversation spearheaded by Cecil Staton from AAHOA, and we'll make this an hour long, and hopefully everybody can, after that, join a happy hour of your choice and enjoy the rest of your day. So if we can move on then, Razy, to the next one. We're going to have an update from Chip Rogers I think I'm going to take a moment to say Chip has been a great friend to the ALIS series. All of AHLA is a great partner in our series, in ALIS, in all of the ALIS summer updates, in ALIS law and everything. So we want to thank Chip for that continued support. We look forward to working with you closer than ever going forward. Chip's going to provide a little bit of an update from the American Hotel and Lodging Association. So Chip, welcome to the program, and the floor is yours.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much. Thanks to all the folks at BHN, and boy, I hate that we didn't get to all take part in Nashville, one of America's truly great cities. But we can do it again. But I'm very excited about the 20th anniversary of ALIS and AHLA being part of that. All right, this will be the fastest 5 minutes in advocacy. So I will speak fast, but we got a lot of topics to hit. So here we go. What is AHLA working on? Well, if you go back to when the pandemic started and began to hit the United States, we were already prepared for that. We really brought to a grinding halt every other issue except for coronavirus issues. And at that time, most of it was focused on the federal government, particularly Congress and the administration, what they were doing. As you know, the CARES Act was the big piece of legislation. We'll mention more of that in just a minute, but it is what created the PPP, the Main Street Lending Act, the unemployment benefits that are helping people, and in some places inhibiting people from coming back to work. And all of that took place in the CARES Act. And we were very engaged on that and had a very active role in making sure that the language in that bill was created in a way that would help our industry. But that is what has happened. Now let's look at what we're looking for right now. And keep in mind, the key time period for Congress to take the next action is between now and the end of July, because then they're going to go on their August recess. So everything you see in front of me, we're trying to get done in the next couple of weeks, would frankly be a miracle, but with your help, we can do it. First of all, limited liability language. We simply believe hotels should not be sued over coronavirus when we're doing our very best to provide safety for our guests and our employees. There have been 9 states so far that have passed some form of limited liability language. We appreciate that. We're trying to get that into the next federal bill so it's universal across the United States. Pandemic risk insurance and business insurance, interruption insurance. Think of this like TRIA, the terrorism risk insurance program that's been around for a number of years. We believe we need that moving forward because there probably will be another pandemic at some point. CMBS, anybody in our industry that understands financing knows how big a problem this is. We estimate that about 1/3 of all hotel debt right now is CMBS related. This is a very tricky issue. We've probably worked more on this one than any other. There is legislation being worked on right now to address this. We've also had constant communication with the administration, particularly Secretary Mnuchin, to try to find a solution to this. It is not easy, but rest assured, it remains one of our single top priorities. Reopening and travel tax incentives. For the first time ever, we might actually see a tax incentive for individuals to take their families on vacation. Some of the proposals include up to $8,000 in tax incentives, which would be fantastic. We're pushing hard for that. We know that's necessary to get people back out there. PPP technical corrections, as you know, it started off as a really good program, and we have improved it through the way by extending the dates, allowing more flexibility, allowing better terms for any repayment. All of that's important, and all of that is a lifeline for our industry, and we hope to get more in the next version of federal legislation. And then the final 2, federal lending facilities. Main Street lending right now does not work for most hotels because of debt ratios. We believe we can get that fixed. It's one of our top issues so that hotels can take part in Main Street lending. And then finally, per diem rates, critical for the next couple of years. If those rates don't go down, we're trying to freeze them at the current levels so that government travel will be paying the same rates they are today at hotels. All right, next slide. Safe Stay guidelines. If you're not part of Safe Stay, please join. I want to thank AHOA and all of our friends there, plus every major brand and ownership group in our industry for endorsing Safe Stay. This is critical as we fight against some terrible ordinances that are being proposed in cities like San Francisco and San Diego and Phoenix and others. We have to be unified behind Safe Stay guidelines. Please go to our website, endorse the Safe Stay guidelines, and also have your employees trained. We've created a training video for all hotel employees, and you can get access through that through our website and through our friends at AHLA. And it's wonderful to make sure your employees are trained and certified, and we can then use that information against convince policymakers that we don't need the heavy hand of government, that we as an industry can take care of this ourselves, and we are taking care of it ourselves. And then the final slide if you want to know like what is next in order, I talked about it just a minute ago, but here's kind of the way this thing has progressed. You have the first two packages that came out of Congress and signed into law. Not a lot of really notoriety around those two. In fact, the media didn't even pick up on them too much. It was number 3 there that created the CARES Act that had all the legislation I mentioned, PPP, Main Street lending, unemployment, and those things. We then came back and had the Flexibility Act that changed a number of items in the PPP, making it more eligible for hoteliers. And then, of course, the Extension Act, which was absolutely critical because most of the dates ended on June 30th, and we were able to push most of those back until the end of the year. By the way, there's still a little PPP money out there, so if you haven't applied yet, you can still gain access to that. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, Package 4 is in the works right now. The negotiations are happening right now. On the Republican side, our top priority is the limited liability language. On the House Democrat side, their top priority, of course, is looking at unemployment. As you know, it runs out at the end of this month, or at least the $600 bonus runs out. And so how do we merge that together with the limited liability language and the unemployment, and then some sort of support mechanism for businesses that have been hurt the most during the pandemic, which would include virtually every hotel. Again, that Package 4 should happen by the end of July. So that's as fast as I can say it all. A lot going on. Thank you for your support. Make sure to sign up at AHLA for Hotels Act. It's free, and it's the single best way that we can communicate as an industry to elected officials. So Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you, and Cecil and team have a wonderful panel. You got some really good experts today talking about the issues impacting us all.
All right, thank you, Chip. And for, on behalf of the entire industry, I want to thank you and your entire team for the tireless efforts you guys have made over the past 4 months. And I know the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty crucial, and you'll be having a lot of Zooms, a lot of phone calls, and probably even knocking on doors with your masks on to try to get things going in the hotel industry's favor. So thank you very much for all of what you do for the industry.
Thank you, Jeff.
One quick note here, obviously, we are part of, the BHN group is part of the North Star Travel Group, which focuses on the travel industry and all aspects of it, from business travel to cruise to hotels and everything in between. So we want to thank everyone at our parent company for all you do for us. So we also want to say these are our conferences in the BHN opportunities aspect of things for all of the conferences that we have. Don't forget about our 6x8 series that we've done with industry experts. You can look at those and everything else about our conferences on burba.com. So let's go on to the views from the boardroom. Without further ado, we're going to get right to the panel that you all come to listen to, which will be moderated by Cecil Staton from AHOA. We'll have Greg Friedman from Peachtree Hotel Group, Amanda Hite from STR, Biran Patel from AHOA, the chairman of AHOA, Tracy Prigmore from TLTSolutions, and John Russell from RLH Corporation. And as they are coming up, I'm going to hand over the reins to the show to Cecil Staton from AHOA. Cecil, again, thank you, and thank AHOA for all of what you do with ALIS and the ALIS Summer Update. So the floor is yours, Cecil.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and good afternoon to all of you. And I just want to thank the BHN group for obviously putting together what I believe was going to be a great panel this afternoon. And we certainly at AHOA are very proud of our partnership with you for these ALIS summer updates. Let me just say another brief word about our panelists today, because they're making my job incredibly easy because of the expertise that they bring to us this afternoon. I want to first mention my colleague, Biran Patel. Biran is the chairman of AHOA, and he has been an active member of our association going all the way back to 2003. He first served as an ambassador and then was elected to the board of directors as a regional director for North Texas. And finally, he was elected secretary in 2017. So he's made a long journey to become our chairman, and we are grateful for his leadership in this industry. He owns and operates multiple branded and independent hotel properties and is also a partner in BHP Investment Company there in Texas. So Biran, good to have you on the panel this afternoon. I next mention my friend John Russell. John is the Chief Executive Officer of RLHC. Prior to joining Red Lion in December of 2019, he served as president and COO of Century Hospitality from October 2017, a management company for hotels, resorts, conference centers, and private residence clubs. John, we're grateful for your participation this afternoon. We then have Greg Friedman, who's CEO of Peachtree Hotel Group. Greg has more than 17 years of hospitality experience with an emphasis on deal structure and financing. He successfully has led Peachtree in more than $1 billion in hotel acquisitions, investments, and development since co-founding the company. Welcome this afternoon, Greg. And then I want to introduce to you Amanda Hite, who is STR's president since 2011, overseeing the company's business activities and overall direction. Under her leadership, STR has experienced substantial growth in its global presence, client base, data coverage, and revenue. Welcome, Amanda. And then we're so glad to have Tracy Prigmore, who is the managing partner for TLTSolutions. She's actually the founder, a real estate acquisition and development firm that provides unparalleled access and insight to alternative investments. Her mission is to empower people to build generational wealth. And through TLTSolutions, she creates opportunities for individuals, for families, and for entities to obtain passive income by investing in residential, multifamily, and hospitality projects. So welcome to our panel this afternoon. I'm going to begin with a question that really is about the unique challenges our industry is facing at the moment. We've all heard the statistics. We know what the data is suggesting. We know how devastating COVID-19 and this pandemic has been to our industry, a far greater impact than the 2008 financial crisis, or even going back to 9/11. You know, from here, we've got a lot of issues to deal with in terms of planning for recovery. I want to ask you a question this afternoon about your leadership. How are you leading? You know, there's really nothing previously like what we're dealing with right now. There's not a lot to build upon. There's not a lot of foundation out there. There's no one to call and ask, how do you deal with this? Because this is such a unique time for our industry. So I want to ask you, how are you dealing with this? Tell me about your leadership. Let me begin with you, Amanda. A little different perspective maybe in the office you're in, but how is this impacting your leadership?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Cecil. There have been many days over the last 4 months where I've said, you know, wow, like you can overwhelm yourself with the uncertainty that you're living in. And I think for me and my team, my leadership perspective is being very transparent with our team about what we know, what decisions we're making and why. And then spending a lot of time saying, you know, here are the things that we need to figure out. And I'm thankful for a lot of friends, like some of the panelists here with me, that I can give them a call and pick their brain and say, hey, what are you thinking about? And just trade perspectives and ideas, because there is no right answer right now. It is, you know, really making sure that you're considering every idea, all the crazy ones that you would normally kind of walk away from and think that will never work. This is the time that you have to think about it, because there's no rule book or playbook for us.
Greg, how about you? How is this impacting your leadership?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and sort of similar to what Amanda said. You know, there's really no perfect playbook, you know, to deal with a pandemic, and it's, you know, ultimately it comes back to, you know, really making sure you keep your team engaged, and really have honest and open communication with the team, and constantly, you know, beyond even having, you know, open communication, really being able to be flexible and being able to pivot, just because it's a fluid situation going through the pandemic. But ultimately, you know, the reality is you got to keep the team and remind them that, you know, there's dark days today, but the reality is there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, and there's much better days ahead. So it's really sort of keeping, you know, to a certain degree, trying to keep optimism, but also keeping a realistic optimism as well, because there's no question there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're going through an unprecedented event where no one really knows. No one really can point to past events. I mean, you can look back at 9/11, which is somewhat of a similar event, from a standpoint of just being such a quick and steep black swan event and how it impacted our industry. But the reality is we've never faced or tested these occupancy levels, and no one knows when there's going to be a vaccine or when travels are going to return back to normal. So you just got to keep that positive energy going within the company.
Tracy, how has it impacted your leadership? I think you're still on mute, Tracy, so we probably need to get you off. There you go.
Okay, I'm up. There we go. So yes, Cecil, thanks for the question. I like to lead from the heart and then the head. So, first I wanted to be empathetic and think about what others needed from me as a leader. And then I got into my head to figure out, where do we go from here? We're a very small company, and and we're new to the space. So this particular, hopefully Black Swan event could have taken us out. And so I'm very grateful to your organization and AAHOA, because when it came to leading, from my head, I had a lot of resources and information that made it easy for me to do my research. And then, I went full force understanding we have third-party management. So went full force working with our third-party managers to understand what they were planning to do, boots on ground. And then, had to really focus with our lenders and what they were willing to do for us. And then had to have the communications with our investors, because that's really the crux of my business is our investors, in addition, to our staff. And so, it's been very interesting, but I will say that by leading from the heart and the head, I've been able to identify all the different resources that were available for us. So I feel resilient and resourceful in the short term, because, we've been able to get the stimulus funds, PPP, thanks to your efforts, but we also received a couple of grants from local businesses in our state. So really it's the head and the heart, and we're just going to keep forging forward.
John, you have a unique perspective today. You said as a CEO of a brand, and you certainly know this industry from the hotel perspective as well. How's this impacting you, your leadership, and what's happening at the moment in your world?
Yeah, thanks, Cecil. I would tell you that the last 4 months have seemed like 4 years. So that said, I want to tag on something that Greg said. We've been through 9/11 and that had its challenges. We've been through 2008 and that had its challenges. But this is the first time in my lifetime that we've had one common enemy worldwide, one, COVID-19, and all the devastation that's brought with it. I say, from my perspective, I like the heart and the mind, and I also like my legs and my arms. We put everything into this. But it's about communication. I really believe you need to be transparent. I think, as Amanda said, you need to communicate daily, weekly, monthly with your owners, your franchisees, with your employees, your guests, and in our case, our shareholders. So I think a good leader and everybody on this panel, I think, has the same kind of traits. It is about communicating, listening to your constituency, and what they tell you. Try to act proactively to help them, which I think all of us have tried to do. I do think this is another time when maybe the first time ever that I've seen the entire travel industry pull together. It's not Red Lion against Choice or Red Lion against Wyndham. We're all in this together, and I applaud AHLA and AHOA for taking the leadership roles both on Capitol Hill, but also in putting together some good training programs that will help our small business owners and operators, and also taking advantage of the CDC and the World Health Organization, your city and state health organizations. But again, I would say that communicate.
Thank you very much, John. I want to pivot just a moment, and Biran, I'm going to lead with you on this particular question. Obviously, what we're dealing with today provides many, many operational challenges for hoteliers, lots of change taking place. I wonder if you would share with us your insights on the kinds of changes you've noticed in hotels as they're attempting to address this new reality that's posed by the pandemic. And just beyond that a little bit, how will hotels be different from a guest perspective when we get to the other side of COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Cecil. So, during this crisis or pandemic, hoteliers are making health and safety along with cleanliness a top priority, even more now than before. Making the guests feel comfortable traveling again and staying in hotels is probably the ultimate goal. Some of the changes that I've seen, digital check-in is even more prevalent now. The opt-in, opt-out housekeeping, breakfast items have been cut down to, grab and go. There's fewer amenities in the rooms. The guests are having to take their own luggage up to their rooms. Valet service is pretty much gone at most hotels that provide it. And then even our shuttle service has been minimized. And then, when we talk about, let's say, post-pandemic, the guest stay, I think, is going to be probably determined a little bit by what the brands do somewhat, right? Right now, they're allowing us franchisees to cut back, but then after the pandemic, are these changes going to be permanent or are they going to be temporary? And whatever those are, I think the guests are going to have to kind of adapt to that culture at that time.
Greg, how about you? What are you seeing as the changes operationally, the challenges that you're facing, and how do you think it's going to be different post-pandemic?
Sure. I think Biran, pretty much raised most of the good points as it relates to it. But, the reality is our industry is really pivoting from being high touch, high service to more low touch, low service as it relates, to the guests. And I think that's something that, as an industry, we have the ability, as we're going through this pandemic and as we come out of it, potentially sort of reset the guest expectation, especially as it relates to some of the select service, limited service hotels where we've, a lot of these limited service and select service hotels have sort of morphed, into, providing, free breakfast and a lot of amenities outside of what traditionally these hotels did provide in the past. And I think there's the ability to potentially help cut some of the costs of operating those hotels, as we get to the other side of this pandemic. And I think, most guests today are open to, that potential reset, just given the fact that, they don't want, a lot of the amenities. If it's housekeeping, if they're staying over for multiple nights, do they really want housekeeping coming in? Do they really want that, free breakfast buffet or whatever the case is? So I think, there's really an opportunity there from that perspective.
John, how about it from the seat of the CEO of a brand?
Yeah, we've got 8 brands with, in 48 states, 2 countries. I think that I echo both what Greg and Biran said. I think there's going to be a greater use of outdoor spaces. I think a lot of hotels that have the space will do things outside in their courtyards, bringing food outside, beverages outside, more even meetings outside. And of course, as everybody said before, removing typical materials from the sleeping rooms, extra pillows, blankets, and Greg's right about the housekeeping. Do you maybe just make up the room once for a two-day stay? I think all of us are helping our brands and our franchisees and owners by negotiating with our vendors to try to bring down some cost to our owner operators. I think, again, echoing what Greg said on self-serve food options, I think it's going to change considerably. Mobile check-ins, digital keys. I think the exterior corridor hotels will do quite well in this environment where you can drive up, pull up, and go right to your room and maybe check in of your phone, go right to your room, pay for PayPal on your phone. So, less touchless areas. So I think the good news is I just came back from the Broadmoor, who reopened on June the 28th, and I saw it in action. Guests were very accepting of all of the changes. They still wanted a great experience, which they got, but they all were wearing masks. They were all social distancing. They appreciated that not all the food and beverage venues were open. So I think the guests today are very open to these kind of changes because of safety, their safety, our employee safety, and their health and welfare.
Thank you. Tracy, I want to ask you, you know, we're learning, we're living through this together. Information is changing almost on a daily basis about how to address certain aspects of what the pandemic is bringing to our industry, things like cleaning protocols, training, even labor issues, how we do our messaging to guests. I just wonder, what are you hearing and what are you thinking about how we're trying to communicate with one another during this time and learn from one another about some of these very significant issues?
Yeah, you know, I believe that it's been wonderful. In fact, I say, well, I learned from one of my mentors, you know, never waste a good crisis. And this challenge that has been brought before us has brought many people together. So I believe that all the work that you've done, AHLA as well as AHOA, and then there's a number of our vendors, servicers who are providing webinars and podcasts. And so, you know, I listen to a number of them on a daily basis, in addition to reaching out to colleagues directly. So we're learning, you know, from one another. And I think everybody's very open to sharing because we're all actually in this struggle together. And so I'm looking forward to what comes out of it. I'm trying not to focus on, you know, the negative aspects of it today, but what's going to come out of it. So as an example, we have one hotel where we had to furlough all the staff except for the 4 full-time staff that we have, and they're working every single role in the hotel. It's a 100-room hotel. They're working every single role. And so we've asked them to, you know, to actually take notes and document, like, where are operational improvements needed, where are changes needed. So I'm hoping that out of this will come a whole new environment for our guests, you know, for our employees that's effective and efficient, you know, to delivering the best level of care. And then ultimately, of course, a better profit margin for our investors. So I'm very hopeful and very appreciative of everybody sharing.
Biran, AHOA has been very active. I think already there have been more than 130 COVID-related webinars. Over 25,000 people have participated in those. But as you talk to AHOA members and look across the industry with your experience, what's your impression on how we're doing in terms of sharing information and learning from one another?
So as you mentioned, Cecil, you know, I think that AHOA has done a tremendous job in providing the education that we need. You know, we're all learning day to day, week to week. You know, as John and Greg mentioned earlier, this is something different than 9/11 and the financial crisis. And so I think that the network and the connections that we have built in our hotel community, we just reach out to others to see what best practices each company is using. And people have been more than willing to help out to see what's been successes in their own companies and things that haven't been, right? And, you know, when it comes to the cleanliness, we at AHOA, as you know, Cecil, are about to launch a certification called the Training in Hotel Sanitization and Cleanliness, which we partnered with Procter & Gamble. So I urge everyone to take part of that so that, you know, all the companies can be even more informed in cleanliness. And then, you know, even through social media, right? That's another platform that people are getting educated with. And then there's also obviously a lot more communication happening between the brands and the hotels consistently. So these are things on top of what platforms that AHOA and other associations are doing are ways that we can assist our industry.
Thank you. Amanda, I want to ask you, you're obviously looking at the data carefully and letting us know, in a sense, what's happening across the industry. But obviously, with the fall in occupancy rates that we've seen across the board, lots of challenges come with that. And I wonder what you're thinking about in terms of the challenges that we're going to face through the end of 2020 for hoteliers, franchisors, and franchisees maybe with some of the projects that are in the pipeline? What's the impact of this going to be across the industry?
Yeah, certainly. That's one of the first things when the whole country shuts down. One of the first questions is, what happens to all these hotels that we have under construction in the industry? And as we think about our forecast, what does the supply and the new supply coming in going to look like? So we did see the active pipeline from May to June. June was a little down from May. So there's been some rooms that opened and have come out of the pipeline. But overall, we still have more rooms in the pipeline today than we did last year. What we saw in June, though, is that we had 34 projects in the pipeline that were either in planning or final planning have now moved out to deferred. So that is in line with what we were thinking. There will be projects that had not gone under construction yet that aren't in the ground. And, the investors or owners are going to just say, we're going to put on the brakes for a little bit. Maybe financing is not as certain as what they thought it was. And so we are starting to see some of that slowdown in the projects that are in final planning or planning. But everything that's under construction, it certainly will come online slower than what was anticipated because construction sites were shut down in most of the country for a period of time. But we do expect all of those rooms to continue and to enter into the supply at some point over the next 18 months or so.
John, what's your perspective on the pipeline at the moment? And let me ask you about something I think you mentioned just a few moments ago. Will exterior corridor hotels have a resurgence during and after the pandemic?
Yeah, let me address the first part of that question, Cecil. We see from a franchise sales perspective, there's definitely been a slowdown in the number of franchises sold. I think that the owners, operators out there today, of course, everybody knows they want to preserve cash. They're concerned about liquidity. They got to pay their mortgages. They got to pay their heat, light, and power bills. They got to take care of their employees and their families. So a lot of potential franchisees today have put things on pause, not stopped, just on pause until things get a little bit better. But we have seen a slowdown in the selling of franchises. On a positive note, the pipeline still seems to be robust for us, and I think it's for a lot of other franchise companies as well, so that's good news. As it relates to the exterior corridor hotels, there are 500,000 hotel rooms out there that are exterior corridor hotels. And I do think that, 10 years ago, everybody seemed to want to get rid of the exterior corridor hotels. It didn't fit the new brand models. Well, now a lot of people are saying, well, these are great locations. They're good. They're along interstates. They're along highways. They're drive-to markets. So as we look throughout, at least our brands, they're doing extremely well with seniors, with families. Like I say, you can pull up, you can check in on your phone, walk right to your room. So I think that during the pandemic and thereafter, and I do think maybe there'll be a re-engineering of exterior corridor hotels to make them a little more trendy, a little more chic, and a little more hip and cool. But I actually think there's going to be a resurgence of exterior corridor hotels.
All right. We will certainly see what happens. Greg, a big issue for hoteliers is obviously liquidity. The crisis is facing, that we're all facing, is really leading brands and owners to look everywhere they can to cut costs and increase revenues. What's your perspective on how are hoteliers looking to shore up liquidity in this environment? An environment that lacks liquidity, especially for legacy investments?
Sure. No, it's a great question. And, the reality is there's a lack of, normal, bank debt, so from a standpoint of going out and refinancing a hotel or getting a loan from like a regulated bank, from the CMBS market, even from, certain debt funds or mortgage REITs, there's really a lack of debt capital out there today. So if there's a shortage of, capital, that's, someone needs capital right now, they can't really access, traditional bank debt. So it puts a lot of pressure on hoteliers from a standpoint of, and even us as a company, as we're out there trying to, potentially refinance debt and so forth. There's very limited options. Beyond that piece, a lot of, ways that we've shored up a lot of liquidity, over the last couple of months is, we've gotten the benefit of having debt deferments and cutting expenses and so forth, but that only goes, so far. And ultimately, we benefited from, again, from your efforts, as well as Chip and so forth, from a standpoint of, the payroll protection program, was, hugely beneficial for our company, but that's, pretty much coming to an end as well. So ultimately, we need, personally, I believe we need another round of stimulus for hotels because we've been so impacted as an industry. So I think that's, one layer that's really needed, for legacy investments, for, investments that have already been made, or hotels that, groups that already own and operate, as well as, there's a lot of, in us as a company, we have different, investment vehicles where we, effectively provide capital in the form of like runway capital or, rescue capital. I think there's a lot of groups, like us that are out there, and that's going to, ultimately be what bridges the gap for a lot of groups to make it through this pandemic. Because it's, unless there's a, a vaccine in short order, this is going to be a pretty long, road of recovery. So.
Biran, AHOA's nearly 20,000 members, many of them first, second, third generation Americans living the American dream, creating businesses. Many of them use the franchise system. In fact, the majority do. I wonder, what are your thoughts as you listen to members about how brands can help drive value as we move further through the pandemic and hopefully to recovery on the other side? What changes are out there that you think might actually strengthen brands, improve the ownership proposition, and yet still satisfy guest needs?
Cecil, so, since the pandemic started till now, brands have come up with, different types of relief. But however, no one knows how long this pandemic is going to last. Sustainability is going to be key for hotel owners. I think that the longer this lasts, the brands are going to have to give even more relief to owners, as long as it doesn't, change the customer experience drastically. In the last 10 years, I think that, brands have added so many things and to create a competitive advantage, and all that comes with cost, right? And it seems like from a hotel owner's standpoint, there's cost associated with everything. So, I think the brands are mindful of the cost implications to franchisees. And if we can try to, eliminate some of that, that would be helpful. Then at the end of the day, the brands need to, work with the hoteliers and market to the consumer. It seems simple, but it's not, it's not that easy to execute.
John, what's your perspective from the seat you're in with respect to that? How are brands going to help drive value moving forward? Changes that will strengthen the brand, yet be there to help the owner proposition, and yet still satisfy guest needs.
Yeah, as Biran pointed out, it is a balancing act. I mean, what brands do is they help small business people get in business for themselves but not by themselves. And the two things that a brand should be bringing to the table, as everybody knows, is you want to increase revenue or decrease operating expenses. Have a brand or flag to increase brand awareness, generates room revenue, has training programs, quality assurance programs, operational programs, preferred vendor programs, things that can make a owner operator successful. In this particular time, and Biran's right again about one other thing, I think over the years, everybody has added bells and whistles to satisfy the guest and the new guest, customizing things for the guest, increasing their experiential endeavors. So I think now, because of what we're in, both sides, both from a brand side as well as from an owner side, there are certain essential things we have to provide the guests, but some of the the niceties might have to go away for a while, or they morph into something else. So I think it's incumbent upon the brand to work very closely with the owner, because in our case, the owner is our customer and the guest is the owner's customer. Yes, tangentially, that's our customer too. So we need to help them find ways that they can decrease their operating costs and at the same time, hopefully find ways to increase some measure of revenue to make that owner operator successful. And I know, just like Biran mentioned before, many of the brands, us included, had fee deferral programs. They had a pause on property improvement plans. The quality assurance inspections were not as frequent. We all went to our vendors, and fortunately, in most cases, the vendors were very responsive in both on pricing and in training. So the nice thing I see with this is we're all working together. We're not fighting each other, and we all have to share the pain. The one thing I'm worried about, though, is that we as a brand need to provide all these services to our owner operator. What I'm fearful is if we give too much, we may not be around. So we got to be careful on what we can do and what we can't do.
Thank you very much, John. Tracy, I want to ask you about a very important issue for hoteliers. You know, at the onset of the pandemic, many believed this would only be something that we would be dealing with for maybe 3 months. And many owners went and sought forbearance on their loans, pardon me, because of the sudden drop in revenue. I wonder what you're hearing and experiencing with lenders currently, because I know a lot of hoteliers are coming to the end of that original forbearance. And yet this is going to continue with a second wave. And in some states, as they're even closing yet again, this is going to go on for a while. How do you expect this to evolve over the next 90 to 180 days? And do you expect lenders will continue to work with their borrowers as loans mature or as they come to the end of the original forbearance?
Yes, I think that it's going to be a mixed bag of experiences. So many colleagues that I've spoken with, they're having very positive experiences with certain types of lenders. So us, for our company, we have a community bank that's a lender, and they have been absolutely wonderful. So I had put together a full presentation about what the impact was going to be and what we thought we would see. And I went to them and they already had a plan for us. And then when we went back after the 90 days wasn't enough, they were very, very accommodating, and we've come up with a plan that lasts to the end of the year. So we're very blessed in that way that our community lender is working with us. They even gave us more time than I initially asked for. They said, no, you're going to need more time. So I, really appreciate and respect them understanding what this pandemic is doing for our business, and that we're really all in this together. And this is something that none of us, could have planned for, or anything that any of us did. On the other side, I have a lender that's a private equity lender. And again, I was proactive and thought I was doing well by reaching out very early on, early March, when we knew that this was going to be a problem. And they said absolutely, unequivocally, no deferment, no forbearance. Sorry, we're not going to do that for you. And we will exercise our rights for default should you not pay. And in fact, we've moved down the road, and we're not in default or anything. We've paid every single mortgage payment. We're burning a lot of cash, as you can imagine, and because that particular hotel depends a lot on group and corporate. It was our highest performing with respect to ADR and top line revenue. So they even came back, and we're not in default, and they required us to send them the PPP money. In fact, sent us a letter warning us that we would go into default because we were refusing to send them the PPP money, because that money was to be used, for our HR, for our staffing, and we did send them the 40%. So they gave us a demand letter and threatened default. So yes, we have some cash reserves, but they're not going to be infinite. So I'm not sure if they'll have a change of heart, but I mean, we've explained this is a pandemic. We could use some assistance here, but ultimately, I think that, you know, we are in a position because there is no other lending options that are available today. We're still, you know, out there looking and trying to figure out how to solve for the problem. But there are going to be lenders who are going to take that position as our lender is and not really care of the situation that we're in. And they, you know, they want their money. They're in business too. So I think it's going to be varied across the board based on the type of hotel you have and the type of lender that you have as to what type of support and deferment that you're going to get.
Greg, I'd like your perspective on this as well, but I want to add into the mix, obviously something that many hoteliers are struggling with or dealing with at the moment, and that's CMBS loans, commercial mortgage-backed security loans. Obviously, a much more complex array of challenges for borrowers who are seeking relief. Many small businesses, in fact, hold these loans in addition to some of the largest REITs and hotel companies. How much of an issue do you see that being? I know a lot of our advocacy work right now with AHLA and AHOA. We are working on this issue in Washington at fever pitch. But what do you see coming down the road there with delinquencies on CMBS loans? And what is that going to do really to lengthen or harm our potential for recovery as an industry?
Yeah. So just to go back to the original, you know, question, just with, you know, when you look at regulated banks, I think the reality is a lot of the regulated banks have been great to work with up until this point. I think some of the banks are going to continue to be, you know, the community banks, regional banks, some of them are still going to be, you know, sympathetic and willing to provide some level of forbearance or interest only, or, you know, whatever the case is, they're going to, you know, be willing to restructure, you know, some of the loans. But we're starting to find, because across our portfolio, you know, to answer your question on the CMBS side as well, you know, 90% of our portfolio, when you look at the 50 plus assets we own on the equity side, you know, 90% of it's with regulated banks. And they've been, for the most part, they've been great to work with. But from the conversations I'm having with different regulated banks and different, you know, presidents and CEOs of different banks, the sense I get is that they're very concerned with how the regulators are going to view these, you know, these forbearance as we get into 2021. And so a lot of them, although they feel like the regulators are, you know, willing to work with them for now, just from past experiences that they've had with, you know, dealing with regulators, and anyone that knows the banking side, it can, you know, move and it can transition. It's pretty fluid and it can change relatively quick. So a lot of them are concerned that although they're able to classify these hotel loans today as they're not being forced to classify them as TDRs, you know, trouble debt restructures that potentially could change, you know, down the road. And because of that, I do think, you know, as the year progresses, I think this may be the last round. You know, if you are getting, you know, debt deferments or getting forbearance from your, you know, from a regulated bank, my gut take is that's probably going to run out here shortly. And then, you know, in regards to the CMBS side, you know, I think they, you know, they're pretty much, you know, unfortunately, like our CMBS loans, we're still making payments. We've not received anything other than the ability to use, you know, potentially use reserve accounts, which you're really just trading, you know, one problem for another problem down the road, because you need those reserve accounts for renovations and, you know, different things like that. So it just, you know, from my standpoint, the CMBS has its own issues, you know, just in regards to how they have to govern those loans because of the, you know, the bonds and their fiduciary responsibility when you're dealing with the special servicers. So it's just that piece is a huge issue, and that's going to create, I think, really a liquidity, you know, crisis within, you know, any hotels that have, you know, CMBS debt, as well as even a lot of these mortgage REITs and, you know, debt with like a, you know, if you have a CLO that provided your, you know, first mortgage loan, or if it's even some of these debt funds, you know, there are issues that are going to exist because their patience levels are going to be a lot thinner than what you're going to get from, you know, regulated banks. But ultimately on both sides, I think it's, you know, there's just not a lot of, you know, there's some flexibility today. It's just running pretty thin.
Amanda, STR forecasts have been suggesting that occupancy rates will not return to normal until at least 2023. Given how things are continuing to change as the pandemic progresses and responses to it change. What variables do you consider when you are creating your outlooks?
Certainly in this case for this pandemic, as we've looked at our forecast and we're looking at it every month instead of quarterly right now, because it is so dynamic and changes so rapidly. We're looking at the demand and the makeup of the mix of business that is starting to return where we do see occupancy. And as expected, we have the benefit of being able to collect data all over the world. So we follow China closely, and we've watched the recovery in China, and we see that the US is about a month behind and following very closely. The leisure demand drive-to markets is coming back first. And we've seen that across the US, although I will say in the last 2 weeks, we've seen demand declines in some markets where we see COVID cases spiking. But we really look at that type of demand, when we expect it to come back, and where are those guests going? Because the class of hotel, are they, are we talking about group business and luxury hotels? Are we talking about a leisure customer in a mid-scale hotel? Those are all variables that will go into how the numbers play out for us.
John, we started out as a panel to talk about the view from the boardroom. Tell me about conversations you're having with your leadership about your strategy that may set your organization on a different path than it has been on, or maybe even there will be some permanent changes in the future. How are you really responding, and what are you saying to your board right now?
Well, that's a very good question, and it has changed. And I think all of us have changed the way we approach business today. And it could be, many of these things will be long lasting. I try to work with both our employees and our board because, we work for the board and the board actually works for the shareholders. It's keeping everybody focused on the mission. And in our case, it's really one of four things. Since we're a franchise business, and I can't speak for Tracy or Amanda or Greg, or Biran, but in our case, it's, our whole goal is to recruit new franchisees and sell to our existing franchise base. It's to open franchises as quickly as possible within reason so the franchisee owner can start making money as well as the company. It's concentrating on the A of ROAR, is to add value through programs that either increase occupancy and revenue or decrease expenses. And the last thing is R in the ROAR, R-O-A-R, is retention. In other words, let's keep our franchisees happy, successful, and keep them in the family. That's what helps grow a franchise company and a franchise system. So, and not focus on anything else right now, specifically right now. It's all about one of those four pillars that would make our owners successful, our employees successful, the board happy, and the franchise and the shareholders happy. So I think from my perspective, Cecil, it's just keeping it simple, keep everybody focused, and ensuring everybody in the company, every employee knows that their job touches one of those four pillars. And I think it's, for us, and I think for most companies, it's keeping the focus on who you are and who you want to be.
We're down to our final couple of minutes, and so we don't have very long to dive into my final question, but I wonder if some of you would like to just respond to it. It's a tough time. We all know that. You are successful leaders of various organizations that are incredibly important within the context of our industry. How are you right now thinking about the best path forward, how to get to that best path forward for your company, given the circumstances we all face? Biran, can I start with you for a final word?
Yeah, I'll make it quick. So, I feel like the hospitality industry is resilient, right? We've gone through so much in the past and we've come out on the other side. And I think even in this situation, this is something that no one expected. But I think that when it's all said and done, we'll come out to be better owners, operators, better companies. I think that just keep your head up, just keep being educated as, everything is changing daily, weekly, so much uncertainty. But I think that if we just stay educated and try to stay afloat during these times, I think we'll come out on the other side even better.
Well, thank you. I think we are officially out of time. I'm sorry I didn't get around to everyone for that final question, but Jeff, thank you so much for letting me be with this distinguished panel. It's been an honor to moderate, and we wish everyone the very best, particularly from AHOA. We're in this together. We're going to make it through together, and we thank you again for the leadership of the BHN group and for allowing us to be a part of this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Cecil. Thank you, Amanda, Greg, John, Tracy, Biran. We really appreciate it. It's a two fins up performance. So thank you so much for being part of it. Yeah, I guess that's the right thing to do. So again, thank you so much for being part of it. We greatly appreciate your time and the great insights. A few takeaways from me. Development pipeline is on track eventually to get back where we're at. Exterior corridors coming back out of this. The relief, everyone has to share the pain on getting out of this. I thought that the most interesting thing was the reliance on mentors and peers. And it's all about talking. It's all about getting that final, having those conversations to make sure that you're getting all angles. So with that said, don't forget, we have our next ALIS Summer Update virtual program from Dallas, the Dallas program, on Monday, July 20th, this coming Monday, 1:30 p.m. Central Time. Visit alissummer.com to register for that. And don't forget, we have ALIS and ALIS Law also coming up in January, alisconference.com and alislaw.com. And I think we have finally the host hotels for July 2021. We've been blessed to have good partners on this, and all of the hotels that originally signed up for 2020 are back on board for 2021. So you're gonna see this hat again next July, if not sooner. And maybe more. So you TWA Hotel, Margaritaville Hotel Nashville, Virgin Hotels Dallas, the Fairmont Century Plaza. Thank you for your partnership with this and getting us online for those in the summer of 2021. And one last thank you to our sponsors. We greatly appreciate all of what you do, and we look for partnerships in the future with each and every one of you as well. So I think that's a wrap up for today. On behalf of the Margaritaville Hotel Nashville and BHN Group and all of our speakers, thank you for tuning in. Be well, be safe, and have a great rest of the day.